Okay, for those of you who were at the Love Sexy Symposium, we ran mad over, and Zaheer was like, this is amazing, but we are way over. And I promised myself that we were not going to be way over this time. So I want to begin by saying, first of all, come on down, guys. I actually don't want to say too much because I might cry. I asked, and I said to myself, they're not coming. And they responded immediately and said they were coming. And that meant so much to me. So the reason why this is such a big deal is because they are the original panel. Every single one of them has chosen to show up for me.
That's right.
That means more than I can ever express, so I'm trying to keep it together. But I know also that you also showed up for Prince, because that's what it's all about. And I am not going to introduce you guys the way that I normally would. I'm just going to say your names, and you can look at the batdance.polishsolid.com, the symposium website, for their bios. These are amazing men. I will say that. And their love of Prince mirrors mine, which is really amazing. Except for Miles Marshall Lewis. So Miles Marshall Lewis is my frenemy. He loves everything I hate and hates everything I love. We never agree, but we still love each other as Prince friends, so I really do appreciate it. So I am going to slide on over in my moderator seat.
That's how it's been usually, right? And this is
It's
just
been
like,
like
I
that.
don't have D'Angelo on this side. Yeah.
But my
right.
grandmother says never switch it up. But just FYI. Okay. I don't know if my mic is on. Oh, is it turned on? Is it on? Yes, it's on now. Hold on. Let's click it. Yep. Am I here? Hello. Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. I hear it.
Cool.
Okay, so if you've been at this rodeo before, you should know what the first question is going to be. And the first question is going to be what is your favorite song on the Batman soundtrack, and what is your least favorite track? And as always, I know Zaheer is ready to rock.
Yeah. So if I say Arms of Orion, you gonna kick me off the stage? No. Like your grandma said, never switch it up. No.
She is. All right.
Like I'm taking everything.
Right. That was my answer, just to keep the frenemy thing going.
No, actually, so I'll start with my least favorite, and it's actually not the Arms of Orion. I actually think the Arms of Orion is a really earnest pop song. It doesn't fit in the album in terms of its production and all of that. So I see why it gets what it gets. And Sheena Easton has earned a lot of hate too. Right. But
What did she do?
The lyrics to the song.
Yeah, she did write the lyrics.
I've been saying, like earning the hate.
People are. I don't know. It's just.
I can be very clear. I think I was very clear last night. But let me be clearer. I do not like Prince singing with other people. Period.
This is true.
Unless it is the Holy Trinity of Sheila, Bonnie, and Levi.
All right,
And that's about it.
Noted.
There we go.
There you go.
So my least favorite is probably, and so now you're really gonna throw me off the stage. It's probably like Lemon Crush.
Yeah.
I was just like,
That's the proper answer. That's,
and I don't really have a reason. It's just not the song that I listen to when I listen to the album. Really, my favorite is The Future. And it is because I had a hard time when the Batman album came out. I had a hard time when Parade came out. I had a hard time because I was still consuming the classic Minneapolis sound, and I really had just gotten used to the Lindrum, and then he took it away, right? And he took it away and replaced it with gated kick drums and these really clipped snares that made it sound really claustrophobic. It didn't have a lot of room for the beats to breathe. But it worked for me in The Future because he partnered it with these sweeping Claire Fisher strings, right? Which were from Crystal Ball. And The Future, of course, is a song I like, and I think Camilla, in her presentation this morning, a systematic overthrow of the underclass, Hollywood conjures images of the past, New World needs spirituality that will last. The lyrics immediately captured me, and I think, there's some Prince songs where there's solicitations going on, Yellow Smiley offers me X, and he's really painting in this, for me, that dystopic future, as well as he really captures in that the mood of Gotham. The mood, we've come a far way from the rebellious optimism of Uptown to this really dark place, which really tells us what happened in the 80s, right? With massive defunding of social services, the undercutting of the social safety net, the Reagan-Bush years, which devastated cities throughout the United States, and partnered with Margaret Thatcher's policies in England, which did the same. And so I felt like with The Future, it was both a kind of look-back analysis and a call for what was needed. So that was always, I always gravitated to the social commentary Prince, and I thought that The Future really, really did that. And I did feel that of all of the external mixers that he got to do 12 inches, I do feel that the William Orbit mix of The Future worked so well, way better than the attempts at house music by Shep Pettibone, right? So The Future was my favorite.
I like that answer. Least favorite is tough for me. I'm sure we'll get into this. I really like Arms of Orion for what it is. I don't like it on this album particularly, but as almost a Broadway show tune, and I think other folks obviously said Disney. I think it's a very good version of this thing he didn't usually do, and that's always interesting to me. So that's not my least favorite. It's hard for me to say least favorite because actually Batman's maybe one of my most favorite Prince albums, and it's real consistent. And interesting in thinking about the question, I came to maybe Batdance as one of my least favorite songs. And part of the reason why is what I love about Prince tends to be composition, tends to be songcraft, songwriting, tends to be lyrics. In all those categories, I think it's a brilliant producing, in terms of production, he probably never was so challenging as he was on Batdance. But it is what it is. It's almost explicitly cobbled together from all these other songs. And so by definition can't be songcraft and songwriting as he does. I mean, you take the distance between, Raspberry Beret as a song that was written and Batdance, which is a song that was assembled. And so that's the thing. And now I say that with I'll listen to Batdance a lot more than average person. And so, that's fine. And I've been tweeting about it for 5 years straight. So the song's all right by me, but I think that that's probably my least favorite song in the album. My most favorite by far is Electric Chair. And you all know I'm right.
Yes.
I mean, it is in the very top tier songs he ever did. Right. And I think it is such, there you go, extraordinary lyrics, extraordinary songcraft. The production is different from anything he'd ever done before. And also different from what a rock song in 1989 was supposed to sound like at the peak of sort of big hair.
Right.
You know, it's like what was rock songs on the radio were different. He obviously understood it was an important song in his catalog by doing it on SNL and these other things that he did with it, and I think also there were the nods to Hendrix in a more explicit way than he had done before. There are nods to I actually think we were talking about Stevie Wonder earlier. I think the clavinet sound underneath there is the most explicit sort of Stevie sound that he just sort of said this is my nod to you, and to get Stevie and Jimmy into the same song and still have it be fully Prince, I think is pretty extraordinary. So I really, it's actually one of those things when people are like, the folks are like, I don't know Prince, or I don't know if I like him, or the stuff I heard on the radio isn't the kind of stuff I like. And especially people come from a rock background or whatever. I'm like, let me give you this. And this is an entry point into all the other things that Prince could be that you didn't know about.
Can we just put a little pin about that SNL performance that had Patrice Rushen on keyboards, which was a complete coming of full circle for Prince, right? Because he had that crush on her, and he wrote "I Feel for You," thinking about her.
And I Want to Be Your Lover. Right?
And I Want to Be Your Lover, and then gets her to play with him. I would, when I saw that performance, I was just, because you're always trying to figure out what's Prince gonna do next. I was like, is Patrice joining the band?
And he was in such a period of flux at that moment that it was like anything could happen. And I think that was also Michael Bland's debut, right?
Michael Bland and Margie Cox, Tamara from Tamara and the Scene.
Such a weird performance. It never ended up being anything that became a band, but Michael Bland, who I think is still one of my most favorite drummers he's ever had, was there. I think that was, well, we can get into that in depth, but I think that shows what that one song could do.
Right.
Is bring a whole new look, a whole new band, a whole new sound, and that was like a one-off.
Yeah. Right. So, no, I'm leaving Arms of Orion out of it. It's not my favorite song. It's not my least favorite song. My favorite song is probably Vicky Waiting, And the reason for that is because of how personal the lyrics are, I was driving around Atlanta today. I went to Morehouse, so I know Atlanta, and I'm no stranger to driving around Atlanta with Prince. And I was doing that in 1989 when Batman came out. So I hadn't heard Batman in a while, and we're all very, very familiar with Prince lyrics, but I just found myself singing along from beginning to end with Vicky Waiting, because which was originally called Anna Waiting. It was originally written for a girlfriend of his, Anna Fantastic. He delivered it to her when she sort of arrived at Paisley Park one day with her pink cashmere, coat, which she wrote a pink cashmere song, for her as well later on. But in terms of flipping it for Vicky Vale in the Batman album, it's just the lyrics. He's talking about, does my character deserve to be a copy made? Talking about having children and wondering if he was like worthy of being a father. It goes deep in the middle of this like cartoon movie soundtrack. These are not things that were grappled with at all in the film, and because it was originally Anna Fantastic, it originally had nothing to do with the movie, but he stuck it on there, and it feels moving to me, especially in light of what happened with him eventually as a father, with him and Maite, to know that these were like things that were on his mind at that time, it moves me kind of, the most.
And he didn't perform it on tour until the honeymoon tour after they got married, right?
I'm not aware.
So if I remember correctly, y'all can look it up for me, but I believe he never played Vicky Waiting live until 1996, until the honeymoon tour was like the couple shows in Hawaii right after they got married, when they first announced she was expecting.
Yeah. Well, my least favorite song is it's Lemon Crush. It was almost Trust.
Yeah.
Duh. But like Anil said, it's not like a bad song because it's a solid soundtrack, and they all have their place, and I actually enjoy the whole album, and I enjoy all the songs. But if I had to pick one that I liked the least, it was almost Trust. And then I played Trust. Sorry. This always happens. Trust obviously is your favorite song.
Because I'll talk about that. I'll talk about yeah.
But no, it was almost Trust. But then, there's this beautiful sort of coda at the end. I wish I could whistle it. It goes kind of like do 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 do, like in the fade out. Like that could be the hook to a whole other song that would be just as dope. He would just do things lyrically as well. I can't be so mad at Trust that I say that it's my least favorite. And followed up by Lemon Crush, which is the next song. I was like, nah, that one I could do without. So I think that's sort of my answer.
All right.
Y'all can't see the look.
It's up to you to save it, Elliott.
I really, I do really enjoy Lemon Crush. So like, you don't have to move for me. We good. So when I was sort of thinking about this question, I ended up ranking basically all of the songs in the album for me, from the ones that I really liked to the ones that I liked the least. And I actually noticed a pattern for me, which was the songs that were at the top were those that were actually credited to really the Joker, right? So sort of Trust and Party Man and sort of Electric Chair. And then that middle was occupied either by Vicky Vale or those credited to Batman. And then my least favorite are those that are actually credited to real sort of Bruce Wayne, right? And so that being Vicky Vale, and that being sort of Arms of Orion. Vicky Vale is the one that's at the bottom for me. Right, but this is, and I think this is so there's almost a kind of reverse that's happening, because usually Miles's sort of least favorite is my favorite, but here sort of his favorite is actually my least favorite, but I think it's for everything that you said. I think for me that kind of introspection doesn't necessarily fit on the album, really sort of lyrically for me, and so I'm not as kind of inspired, as taken by that particular song, right? And this is to then say my favorite song is actually really sort of Electric Chair, is my favorite, because I'm somewhat of a kind of one-note person when it comes to Prince, right? I like Prince at his rawest, at his funkiest, at his most kind of sexually explicit, right? And so for me, Electric Chair hits all of those things, right? We can, of course, go to sort of about the line, about sort of if a man is sort of guilty for what's the blanking all the
Favorite song,
my favorite song, and I blanked out on the lyrics. I was like, if a man is considered guilty for all the crimes he commits in his mind, right? Then we'll sort of give him an electric chair for all my future crimes, right? And I'm like, that line will stop you it stops me in my traps, right? Because I'm just like, if someone said that to me, I would probably give them my number, right? And then he goes on to say, my brain is jacking off, or is sort of jacking all over the place, right? So it's like, this is the kind of stuff that for me, I'm like, yep, this is the Prince that I like. This is the Prince that I came for. This is the Prince that I kind of won on a record. And so for me, Electric Chair is that song that for me is the one that I will always kind of listen to. It's the one that I will always kind of go to.
That's messed up though, how he's like, I was dancing with your friend, but all the time I was watching you.
Yeah,
that's really cold.
But here's the thing, though.
That's some Joker shit, right? That's
cold-blooded.
I mean, that's Prince, but it would work. Prince will steal anybody, right? We know this, and that line is gonna work any other time. I'm like, go ahead, do it, right? So it works. That's me.
Awesome. So our second question, do you have a favorite B-side from the Batman singles?
Yes. Fill You Up. Again, one-note person. Right.
Consistent. We call it consistent.
Yeah, exactly. But I will actually one-up myself. And this goes to something that I think Adam brought up about B-sides. I think one thing that I think is really interesting about Fill You Up being the B-side to Party Man is that Party Man also has Prince in a pitched up voice, and of course Fill You Up does as well. And so for me, I almost want to kind of think about the kinds of connections between Party Man and really Camille. Right, and how and not only Party Man but also Gemini, and how both Camille and Gemini are kind of continuing in a particular kind of tradition about Prince playing with binaries and in terms of dualities, right? There's a kind of two-ness that's happening there, and so when I kind of listen to Fill You Up, and it makes me think about Camille, which makes me think about Gemini, which also I think, for me, has a particular kind of a kind of sort of I would say sort of theorization about if sort of Spooky Electric becomes this kind of darker side of Camille, is Party Man the more kind of funkier side of Camille, right? So I think about Fill You Up as a particular kind of extension of Camille that Prince hasn't sort of explicitly kind of acknowledged. And so for someone who loves the Camille album, of course, sort of Fill You Up being on there, but listening to Party Man and to hear the kind of remnants of really Camille on that particular song, it's my second favorite on the album. That means something to me. And so in terms of Fill You Up, that's my favorite B-side on it.
Right. I mean, I love all the B-sides, really. It's actually hard to pick a favorite. I would go out on a limb and I'm always so worried about being the unpopular opinion. 200 balloons, Okay. The reason I picked 200 balloons, like, we were talking about Batdance a second ago, and I guess you were saying that, like, you didn't like this, pastiche collage sort of thing that he was doing. It's not, an actual song in the way that Prince's songcraft is. But it is reminiscent of sort of like the Bomb Squad and Public Enemy and things that were going on, at that same time with, the sampling laws not really sort of getting stricter yet, and so you could grab from whatever you wanted. He just did it with dialogue from the movie, but it was like, Batdance was for me sort of like him doing that, and like him being the Bomb Squad, let's say. To an extent. And so 200 Balloons, like, similarly to me, it's just this cacophony of like, it's noisy, and I don't know what it's about, really. And I just, I love it. In terms of, I don't know, something else to say about the noise of it. So going back to Public Enemy, Chuck D, lead, MC from Public Enemy, was talking about their production style at whatever point and saying that it was their goal to, like, to create noise, basically, orchestrated noise from James Brown and, like, the Watt Stack soundtrack and wherever else they were getting stuff from, Sly Stone, etc. And so, I appreciate it just on that level that it's raucous and it's sort of, inscrutable in terms of what exactly 200 balloons, like, what? Yeah. Oh, nobody's gonna stop them, okay? But what? Huh? Just I like, but they're all great. They're all it depends on the mood I'm in, I guess. But I appreciate them all.
It's funny because 200 Balloons is my least favorite, but I think there's a I remember going to buy the cassette single because they didn't have the vinyl to get to 200 Balloons, and then listen to it, and it was the parade in the movie. Right. So the Joker's got the parade, and it's 200th anniversary Gotham and whatever. Right. And that to me felt like, and this is, me being a teenager, like, that's too commercial. He made a thing that's so obviously referencing the thing in the movie. It's not even the characters. It's just like this cartoon movie. I don't know how I feel about that. Right. And then in thinking about favorites, it's funny because my immediate answer was I Love You and Me. Mm-hmm. And it struck me as so transgressive at the time. Yeah. And part of it was, obviously very explicit lyrics. But the simplicity of it. We had not heard him do such a stripped down song with so few elements. I mean, there's points. It's literally just his voice a cappella, and that had not happened. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, at this time when everything else on the record and everything around the album was so produced. Mm-hmm. Like Lemon Crush, one of the things I love most about it is it's very obviously produced, right? Like, it's sort of this very studio production. You're almost hearing the work of we did this at the console. And I Love You and Me is this, like, it's him and a mic, right? And I think that was so striking. And, obviously, I think all of us, this is grounded in our history. And I think of, like, the young woman who gave me the copy of I Love You and Me that I heard on the first time. I was like, oh, yeah, that left an impression. So, like, that sense of, like, where you were when you heard the music, I think all filters into it. But are we counting the Scandalous Sex Suite as B-sides?
Yes.
Because
What? I was like, sex.
well,
would
no, I
be-
know what I'm
sex
saying.
would-
Because
yeah,
sex is on
would
there.
be-
Because sex is like it's whatever. Like it's not my favorite like B-side. But the sweet
Right.
The sweet
is still incredible, and I probably listened to that more than I listened to the album as a whole.
Yeah.
Because there's so much there, and also like I love the cheesiness of like Kim Basinger's parts. Like I think that sort of like just Prince just going for it. Like I'm not gonna even no self-consciousness whatsoever. Like I own a studio, so I might as well. You know what I mean? Like I think that's that was also always appealing to me. Like there was no self-consciousness about that. Nobody else had that confidence. So yeah, so I think that's sort of tied for me of the B-sides. I love "Feel You Up" a lot.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not a Batman song. It's like it's a Camille song, and that's like its
Right.
own thing.
You know what's funny about 200 Balloons is I always thought it was I don't know if it was intended this way. So Prince does this whole soundtrack, gives all these songs to Tim Burton, and he only uses 2, Trust and 200 Balloons. And he's like, oh yeah, well I'm not even gonna put 200 Balloons on the soundtrack. He's like, I'm not even gonna put that on my album. Since you don't want to put my songs in your movie, I'm not putting the songs in the album. But my favorite is Feel You Up, because I think of this, the Camille, the Lindrum. I was still hungering for that sound in 1989. Yes, I'm so
82 and
sorry.
89.
Yes, I'm so sorry that I know people had like moved on, but I was like, I still need to hear that. I still need to hear that knock and ping, And I like the point about the duality, I think, and I appreciate Fridar's drawing us back to the trickster figure and Alegba. And, we really saw Prince engage blues during this period, even like from the Love Sexy tour, then the If I Had a Harem, which was intended for I think was one of the songs intended for the Rave Project before Batman. And what's interesting is Albert Magnoli, who was the director for Purple Rain, at some point Prince fired his management, and Albert Magnoli became his manager, and also directed, I think, the Batdance and Party Man video. And there was an interview where Albert Magnoli, at the time, is talking about their future film projects, and one was to be a bio on Robert Johnson.
right.
So that really tells us that Prince, this was not some like superficial engagement with this tradition. Like and everyone knows the story. There's this whole like lore about Robert Johnson going to the crossroads and making that deal with the devil to get the gift, right? And so it was clear that Prince was very well aware of that duality, and how in the West African tradition, it was to be embodied. It was a tension to hold, not to reject. And so that gives another kind of depth, I think, to the Gemini figure. And the crashing of an upscale party,
Right.
where he basically kills everybody, right? I think about the crashing of the upscale party in Under the Cherry Moon, right? That Prince, with the boombox, that Prince as like this trickster figure is doing, a send up on classes, on elites, right? Even the record store joke. And so Party Man is just that next iteration of, oh yeah? Well, here, I'm gonna turn y'all out.
Well, it's so wild too, because in The Dark Knight they got a scene where the Joker comes and crashes the party,
Right.
and it's more of a reference to me, and who knows what they were doing in making the film, but to me it seems like more of a reference to the Party Man video than it is to any of the Batman movies that came before. Like the staging and everything sort of echoes that like you disrupted the scene.
Right. As a parenthetical, right? 200 Balloons didn't make the film, did it? I thought it was replaced by Trust.
No.
Oh, it was?
Yeah,
Oh.
it was replaced by
there you go.
Trust.
That scene,
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
but
gotcha.
they cut it.
Tim Burton was like, this
Tim
is
Burton
too
is
wild.
like, yeah, exactly. So he was like, let's
like,
do Trust.
okay.
I really don't get there.
I think, but I want to hit that blues point, a lot, because you have this sort of, in the period of a couple months, he goes from Dance with the Devil, which also didn't make the film and has never, been out there, right?
That-
but
it's
but
great.
it's a great song,
great
and
song.
explicitly about that sort of duality with the
Right.
devil.
Yeah.
And then you go to right after the film becomes a hit. It's August. The film comes out in June?
June.
Right? And August is when that story breaks of like he's going to do a biopic on Robert Johnson. And, you know, I always think there's this through line. You know, Robert Johnson is born maybe 20, 30 miles from where Prince's father was born, right? And that, like that, and within a couple of years, too. I think it's 4 or 5 years, right? So this grounding is family. This isn't like just the story of, you know, here's the crossroads and here's the blues and this thing. This is like his dad, who he's still writing with at this point, and who was around more than he'd been during most of the 80s. Is this very present thing. So for him to tell a story.
Scandalous.
Exactly. Yeah, he's part of Scandalous.
But,
He's
you
sort
know,
of in the
it's
mix.
also this period where Prince is actually engaging. You know, it's like he had done work for proteges, but it's during this period that he's writing for Shaka Khan. He's writing for Mavis Staples. He's writing for Patti LaBelle. He's
George
starting
Clinton
to
now,
work with
too?
George Clinton. So he's actually, I think, much more explicitly, like he's achieved a level of comfort about his own artistry, and also has a platform, and he's using that to reach back to these legendary shapers of the Black tradition.
Right.
And I think that
Right.
that, you know, it's clear during this period. It was kind of like what's happening, and you know, between 88 and 90, it was, you know, there was a lot going on.
Right.
You know, Batdance probably represent what was going on in Prince's head because it was all over the place. But even within that, all over the place, there seemed to be this. He really was turning towards the tradition. And Miles Davis, of course, had come
Sure.
into his life
Yeah.
at this point too. So
Well, this is also still the moment when Paisley Park as a label has all this potential still, right? Like,
Right.
you know, it doesn't quite fulfill it, but that sense of like, I mean, when you sign George Clinton, when you sign, you know, Mavis, an artist of this caliber, people are assuming this is going to be as big as anything he's done.
Right.
And then the films, you talk about these films, like they're credible because like Cherry Moon wasn't a hit, but like Batman was and Purple Rain was, and so this I think that sort of sense of like his ability to meld the commercial and really challenging, because the other thing is like this album doesn't sound like anything else there, and it's certainly not following trends in a lot
Right.
of ways. I think that was his belief was like, I'm going to merge these pieces and it's going to work.
Right.
Yeah. And it brought him back to like a multi-platinum status that he hadn't enjoyed for a few albums.
So actually, I kind of want to follow up a little bit with Anil's comments and about I Love You and Me. I really love that song. And Harold's going to like strike me down because he's going to say that I'm contradicting myself. But what I really like about I Love You and Me, and this gets me to clarify some things about When Two Are in Love.
Oh, that's right,
if
because you hate the
listen to-
sparseness. I
hate
remember
the
this.
I hate the
Yeah.
sparseness.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is the sparseness when it comes to the music production.
Yeah.
And because I don't know where I was, just on somebody's podcast or something, I say, maybe it was Kanisa, I can't remember, but I love the lyrics of the vocal performance of When Two Are in Love.
Okay.
I love Prince's, you know, falsetto.
Right.
I hate the music because I just think it's dry in terms of no special effects. I Love You and Me was a stunning vocal performance by Prince, sort of unobstructed by music. And for me, the pinnacle of that is solo on Come,
Yes.
which is one of my
Yes.
favorite Prince
Yes.
songs of all time,
Right.
because it is just pure Prince vocals.
Right.
So before that, we get to Come, and I think Come is a brilliant album. I don't care what anybody says. This was the closest thing to that that I had heard. You know, so I was the girl who bought the bootlegs, and one of my favorite bootlegs, and this has nothing to do with the whole Piano and the Mic tour. Before the Piano and the Mic tour, my favorite bootleg was Prince on Piano from the 80s, not the one they just released, but there was another bootleg. I played that to death because you could really hear him. It was just him and the piano.
Right.
And nothing really happened like that on his studio recordings up until that was the closest thing. So I really love that vocal performance of, and I thought in real time, what is Arms of Orion doing on the record when you got, you know,
Right,
I Love
right,
You and Me?
right.
Like,
No.
can't we just do like, arms be, like if you gotta have arms, like, can't we make that a B-side? And like put,
But
yeah.
people would have lost their minds if they would have put that song on the album in 1989.
You think so?
It's way out there. I mean, we forget now. Like, people say whatever. That song, I mean, I remember at the time, people being like, how like how did this happen, kind of thing. Like you play for people and be like, he said what now?
Well, see, this is why Elliott and I are best friends, because I like the rebel.
Right.
I like
exactly.
Prince the rebel. I
Yeah.
like
Right,
Prince,
sure.
like he doesn't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
He's gonna do what he's gonna do, and that's what I love about Prince. Okay, so did you see the Batman film when it came out? Did you go see it for Prince, Batman, or both?
I did not see it when it came out.
Oh wow.
Because I heard that I was in the Batcave. Because I heard that the music wasn't on there.
Wow.
You know, and I was just like, I mean, I was not a comic book person, right? So like, I had no investment in Batman. I had no investment in Michael Keaton, or in Jack Nicholson, or in Tim Burton. You know, I thought Beetlejuice was cute, but that was it. So, you know, people had seen the movie and they were like, but Prince's songs ain't in there. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll wait till it comes out on video or whatever. So I saw it on video. Okay. And I was just like, oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't care about Tim Burton or Mike. Are there Michael Keaton fans in 1989? Is that a thing? I mean, the guy seems perfectly nice, but I don't think there were. But it was such a phenomenon. I mean,
Right.
you know, until everybody got an X hat, everybody had a Batman hat,
Right.
right? And it was like everywhere and omnipresent. And it was like it didn't matter if the Prince music was in it. He made the soundtrack. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, it was like I didn't
soundtrack was
have
good
this
enough.
logical connection of like, well, I need 8 minutes of Prince footage in the thing before I'm going to go. I'm like, kid, he's got the thing. It's got the logo on the front. I'm going to go to the movie. That's it. You know, there wasn't. I didn't process it at this like that level. But also like I think it's hard to remember what a phenomenon it was, and two, that we didn't have those then.
Right.
Like we didn't have like that kind of event, blockbuster, comic book franchise. I mean, we have one every 3 weeks right now,
right,
you know, and so like we don't even notice it anymore.
Right.
But that in that moment, like there were hit films, but not like that, and not that everybody. I mean, the wild thing is you see, and I see folks with like the Batman shirt and that stuff on now. When people buy a Batman shirt now, and they've had Dark Knight and all these other movies come out, they buy it with the logo for that movie from 1989,
Right.
right? And they changed the logo up even in that series. So there's been whatever 10 movies. And people are still like, that is the iconic representation. Yeah. And I think no small part of it is every single one of those Prince albums and Prince singles had that on it.
Yeah.
And so it was all like that integration. And I mean, you look at the corporate integration synergies, like they did that. And then you look at the other extreme of the exact same playbook, and which is Madonna and Dick Tracy, which is a year later, 2 years later.
Oh, God.
And that is 10 different kinds of bad.
Right.
Movies bad, albums bad, Locust bad,
Right.
cartoons bad. You are not wearing a Dick Tracy shirt right now.
Right.
So like that whole thing is like, it could have been that. It could have easily been that. Like one other choice, it could have been that.
Right. I mean, for me, there have been different times in my life where I felt, you know, like Prince was trolling me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, because I was at that time in college and stuff, I was a huge 9.5 Weeks fan. And
Wow.
all of a sudden I found out that like Prince was dating Kim Basinger, which is what I would have done if I was famous enough to like just dial her up and be like, you know. The same thing happened when he worked with Spike Lee, because I went to Morehouse because of Spike Lee, because of School Days. I went to see all of his movies on day one. It was like a thing for me, and he did the soundtrack to Girl 6, and I was like, wow. So, you know, I grew up on comics. But I grew up in the South Bronx, and my great-grandmother would like sort of watch me while she was watching the stories and just tell me to like, you know, go in the room and grab some comics, because my dad still had like a cardboard box of all his comics from the 60s, you know, in his old bedroom or whatever. So comics taught me how to read, you know, in addition to like Sesame Street and Electric Company. By the time I started kindergarten, I was reading already, you know. And Batman, you know, was a favorite naturally. So I was there for like a serious sort of interpretation of Batman anyway. And then Prince was gonna do the soundtrack to Batman. I was like, what's up, Prince? Well, you know. So yeah, I mean, I saw it. That was also the summer of Do the Right Thing.
It was.
You know, and those were like the pillars of my interests at the time, you know. But yeah, it was, you know, I enjoyed it. Like the Dark Knight films are better, but that was the first time Tim Burton was trying to do something darker, and Kim Basinger was in it. But,
Right.
What do you need?
So I have somewhat of a different take, right? So I was in elementary school. I'm kind of giving this all because to kind of set the scene. So I was in elementary school when Batman came out. My parents did not play Prince in the house. I couldn't really listen to Prince. There were a number of sort of musicians who I couldn't really listen to, right? But I was a Tim Burton fan, right? So I think sort of Beetlejuice and Pee-wee, right, spoke to me in elementary school, right? And I was obsessed with watching the 1960s, so, sort of reruns of Batman, right? And so when I hear that Tim Burton is doing a film based off of one of my TV shows, my really sort of favorite TV shows as sort of a kid, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna see this, right? And so Batman became, and I thought I sort of talked about this story before, but Batman was like my first major introduction into Prince, right? I'd heard Prince obviously on the radio, right? And I heard Prince, and I should say that I'm an only child, so there wasn't like an older sibling that I could go to get their records, and especially by 1989, most of my older cousins weren't listening to Prince at that particular moment, right? And so I loved the movie, got the soundtrack, loved the soundtrack. Now my parents let me listen to Prince at this particular moment for two reasons. One, because they thought that Prince had become less sexual. They were wrong, right? And then two, for them there was a new kind of enemy, which was rap. And so they were like, and I should say this, I'm from Florida, and 1989 is Two Live Crew, right? And so my mother was like, do I want him listening to Luther Campbell or do I want him listening to Prince? And so, little did she know, I was also listening to Luther Campbell. But that became my kind of first major introduction. And what I loved about the soundtrack, and what I still love about the soundtrack, is that what that movie did for me as a kid was like, this really sort of oddball, quirky person. And that particular movie is just like all kinds of weird, right? And that album is also all kinds of weird. Like for the Future to be the first song on that album is just completely takes you in a different kind of world, right? And it for me it just became this kind of magical kind of space for me. And so I always hold on to the Batman soundtrack for a number of reasons. And I'll very quickly say this because I know it's not a question that you asked us, but one of my biggest sort of I think gripes about sort of the Batman soundtrack, in terms of, well, yeah, and especially about sort of the kind of scandalous sex suite, is that I was really frustrated that we were somehow robbed of a Prince and Billy D. Williams kind of collaboration, right? Because Billy D. Williams is in the movie, and for me, this is a moment when the two coolest, smoothest, sharpest, sexy black men walk this earth, and we could not find a moment to get them into the studio to do something. I don't even care what it had to be, right? We could have had Billy D. Williams introduce the scandalous sex suite like it was some sort of quiet storm, right? This is Billy D. Williams, and you were listening to the scandalous sex suite. Can you imagine if you...
I think if you're Prince in 1989
Right.
and you're choosing who you're going to bring to the studio...
Okay, yes, right.
on Scandalous,
True.
of everybody in the whole Batman
Right.
cast,
Right.
I think he's pretty far down the list past Kim Basinger.
I'm just saying if you introduce the scandalous sex suite, and again in a quiet storm way, your record will catch on fire. Literally, right? Anyway, yeah. So that's I wanted to kind of share that because I still think about that, especially I do. It's just because I actually do love the kind of 1989 Batman, and I love Batman Returns, and of course, really sort of Billy D. He was supposed to return for that, and Tim Burton, yeah, and exactly as Two-Face, and Tim Burton went in a different direction, and so we never got to see more of Billy D. Williams, and there's just a moment where I'm just like,
Big Billy.
Again, sorry. What could have been? So I wanted to, before we, because I was like, that wasn't one of the questions, but I just wanted to, because it keeps me up at night sometimes.
More Billy D content.
More Billy D. I mean, you know.
D'Angelo,
Yes.
may I read something
Oh, yes.
quickly? This is from the biography Prince, self-titled, whatever, by Matt Thorne, right? And I just didn't know if anybody else on the panel was familiar with this. But the paragraph says, this system is further complicated by Prince's claim in an interview with a German journalist that the Joker wrote The Arms of Orion. Okay, whatever. But in the same interview, Prince also says that, quote, the album was supposed to be a duet. The album was supposed to be a duet between Michael Jackson and me. He as Batman, me as Joker. Liz Jones, who I don't remember who that is, suggests this was a passing whim of Batman producer John Peters. Was that addressed yesterday or something? Like,
It was
that
addressed
brought up?
earlier today.
Okay.
It was,
Right.
and we don't want to go there.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. so I'm actually with Anil in terms of if Prince had 10 seconds in the Batman film, I wanted to hear it.
Right.
So I wasn't into comics either. Well, actually, I take that back. I love the X-Men, but only for Storm. So I actually didn't really love the X-Men. I love Storm. So
That's fair.
and
Valid.
so I was really excited that Prince was attached to such a high-profile project
Right.
because he had took such hits with Under the Cherry Moon, which is my personal favorite Prince film,
Right.
and he took some hits with Love Sexy just for the cover alone.
Right.
And so, like, I'm one of those people. I don't know if you've seen the 5 Heartbeats,
Yes.
but do you know Eddie Kane?
Right.
I never wanted Prince.
Eddie Kane fans.
No, listen to me. I never wanted Prince to become Eddie Kane.
Right.
And what I mean by that is that I wanted Prince to be eternally free. No, I'm serious. I wanted Prince to be eternally free.
Right.
And the one way that you can be eternally free is when you have money. So it's really important for me that Prince made money so that he could continue to make music for us. So when Batman did really well, I was like, thank you. And then we got Graffiti Bridge. Because like we wouldn't, no, and I actually mean that sincerely. Even though Graffiti Bridge is not my favorite film, it is a Prince film.
Right.
And he was allowed to continue to make films because he showed commercial success.
Right.
Under the Cherry Moon would have never happened if it wasn't for the success of Purple Rain. So I am grateful to Purple Rain just to get Under the Cherry Moon.
Right. Right.
So when this album came out, I actually thought the sound, the future in particular, that opening, it
Right.
really, you said it just a few seconds ago, it takes you to a different world.
Yeah,
like,
it's so atmospheric
immediately.
in a way that almost, I mean, well, Sign of the Times had that.
Yeah.
Right, as an opener, and it sort of sets a tone. But it was a sound that was more akin, it was like, that's Prince's sound.
Right.
And the future was not. It was like,
Right.
whoa, I haven't seen this before. And I think the strings is a huge part of it.
Yeah, and to mirror Harold, because I said it first last week, I could listen to the entire Nude tour with the future drum programming under every song.
Right.
Because that's powerful. It's powerful. So let's get to the next question.
Okay.
Do you feel that Prince felt constraints or exercised absolute freedom with creating a soundtrack for someone else's film, not his own? So do you feel do you think he felt constraints or absolute freedom?
I don't know how he approached it, but from the reports, he was very excited. And I think that the Batman story spoke to him. I think Karen talked about this a little bit in her presentation this morning about the duality. Paisley Park was his Bat Cave, you know, the personas that he extracted out of the storyline kind of spoke to the personas he had been developing, right? There was the kid, there was Prince, there was the Time, you know, who were like the funky anti-heroes. There was Vanity or Apollonia, you know, the feminine expression, the Vicky Vale-ish kind of characters. So I think that triple personality was something that Prince had always engaged in. So I think it wasn't so much that it constrained him. I think it gave him, I think as Karen pointed out, like a way to project in a very common, and symbols and characters that were much more accessible, to help him play out these ideas that he had been playing with for all along,
Right.
you know, of masculine, feminine, of rock, of funk, of black and white, of like all of the binary, which wasn't really a binary, it was like kind of a trinary, right?
Right.
That he had been, so I think it liberated him in a way to make what was really an odd, I mean, this is a somewhat odd, like when you read like who's being attributed to, like the verses are being attributed to different characters, or who wrote, you know, like who's credited.
Right.
You know, and for him it was 4 characters, right? Because he separated Batman from Bruce Wayne.
Right.
And so I think that was a sign of freedom for him. It wasn't constraint, and the fact that only one song ended up on the album, I mean on the movie, you know, and that they still pushed the album.
Well, two
Two songs,
Trust and
right?
Party
Trust
Man.
and
Okay,
Trust
there we
and
go.
Party
See,
Man,
I keep
yeah.
messing this up. I told y'all I didn't see the movie. I told y'all I didn't see the movie, right? But that this still was considered the soundtrack, and I think some people mentioned earlier, probably to Danny Elfman's great, you know, chagrin and
I mean,
disappointment.
he still sold a boatload of records.
Oh, yeah. Right,
you know.
still.
It was like,
Yeah.
this is the
I
soundtrack.
wasn't what you were talking about, yeah.
So I think it was freeing for him.
Yeah, I think commercial and especially calendar constraints almost always serve Prince really well. I think whenever he had something sort of, I got to get this done by this time, or this is what we need to do, he always rose to the occasion. And I think about, for so many of the records, you know, whether it was When Doves Cry on Purple Rain, or These in the Temple on Graffiti Bridge, or, you know, many other records, the last song he did, the one that he got done last minute before the album was going to come together, was, you know, the signature song or the biggest hit, the lead
Right.
single, all that kind of stuff. Right, exactly.
When
right.
Doves Cry.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and I think that was this sort of like, I think it evoked a part of him that came out on stage, which is like, you know, I want to see some perfection, right? It's the sense of like, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to nail this thing because I got to right now.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of pressure and constraint often brought out the best in him. And I think this was one of the fastest albums that came together for him, because there wasn't time to overthink it. And, you know, it's interesting where there was, what was the song Susan Rogers said he sort of ruined it by putting on overdubs intentionally? Was that?
Wally or something?
Yeah, was it Wally that just like he just kept adding stuff to it, right, kept adding stuff to it, right, and then a lot of us felt, I think, when the Gold album came out, some of the songs had been around for a year or 2 or 3, and he started to put overdubs on it. We got Cowbell and Endorphin Machine, and that didn't add anything, right, and so there's a sense of like, and also his own, like he would obviously get bored with stuff after a while, so the urgency of like the short time to create and the short time to going out there. And the contrast to when he'd been most frustrated, like he hadn't been able to get "Let's Work Out" while, you know, the song would have still been hitting in the clubs. Like, I think that sense of immediacy really, really fueled a lot of his best tendencies and his best work, and it connected most to the impulse of what he was like live.
Right.
So I think that was really powerful. But it is interesting because if I go to the, you know, why Pat Dance is like harder to listen to, I think it is that impulse of let me throw more and more on here. If you took 200 balloons and you do the most extreme version of like kitchen sink production on this thing, you end up with Batdance, right? Because you
Right,
sort of add
right.
parts. But I think there is absolutely that Bomb Squad influence, and also again contextualizing 1989, you have the inflection point in sampling culture, Biz Markie and everything
Right,
else sort of
De La
happens.
Soul, yeah.
Exactly, De La Soul is happening, and then you have the production evolution of Bomb Squad happening. You have the Beastie Boys putting out Paul's Boutique.
Right, right.
You have, and then, you know, I thought the mention of Art of Noise earlier was brilliant. I think that was such an astute, you know, analog to what was happening here. And Prince often would do the like, I'm going to do my version of that. Like, I don't think he has to be like, I'm aping that. The other one that comes to mind is he had that other Camille song on the Bright Lights Big City soundtrack,
Right,
and the big hit on that was
Good Love, yeah.
Right, well, Good Love was on there. The big hit from that soundtrack was Pump Up the Volume by Mars Inc.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was
And that
thinking
was-
the LL thing, going back to Cali.
yeah.
that was on there too.
But
Yeah.
and I think so Pump Up the Volume was one of the first really big, totally sample driven radio hits. Right. And it was one of those like, this is incoherent as classic songwriting, but it was as clearly assembled with the sort of new style production stuff. And I think no small part of this too is like the movie was made in the UK. He would have been listening to what's on the radio in the UK, and they were ahead on what was happening in house music, what was happening in production styles compared to what was on the radio here. It's like all those things connect together, and I think he's like, I'm going to do my take on these things, and I think that sort of ends up being because of those constraints. Because you're like, I have to pull it together, I have to serve this audience, I have to do this thing I'm trying to do, and that movie's coming out. Like, you can't move that. That's not up to you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think about being maybe 12 or 13, okay, let's say 12, in Toys R Us, right? And I'm walking through Toys R Us, and before I get to, the Micronauts section or the G.I. Joes or whatever, there's Michael Jackson's Thriller as like a toy, basically. Like the album was so popular that you could go and buy the picture disc of Michael Jackson next to the album that he did with E.T. or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was that popular, and that takes me to fast forward to Batman, and the version of Batman that I bought was like a round black tin.
Yes.
Collector's
edition, but there's 8 million of them.
Right. Exactly. Limited edition black tin where the CD is in there and it costs twice as much a regular CD. Yeah. And I mean that speaks to sort of the commercial nature, of the album and like the juggernaut of Warner Brothers, pushing this film and making sure that the soundtrack was like on par with it, and shooting it to #1 and stuff. And so, in my opinion, Prince knew that he was going to have the ears of all the people who were going to be into this blockbuster, and I don't feel that he was constrained by it at all. I think that he thought, of course, I still got the funk. The funk will never leave me. I got hits. People are gonna, people weren't buying Love Sexy. People weren't buying whatever. But like, they gonna buy this. Here, take these 9 songs. Take this beat. I don't mind. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think it was fine.
Yeah, I'm going to say this really quickly,
Yeah.
just because I think you're right in that last kind of section. Is that like, for me, with Tim Burton, kind of when Prince gives sort of 200 when he gives sort of 200 balloons and Ray, right, he gives those to Tim Burton. And Tim Burton's like, no, I don't want these. Give me something else, right? That I think, and given sort of the kind of time constraint, Prince was like, all right, you don't like this, you're gonna love this, right? And I think that kind of sort of competitive edge that we all love Prince for, right? I think shines a lot in terms of Batman, right? I always call Prince very much sort of uncompromising, right? That's the kind of buzzword that I use with my students about Prince being uncompromising. And I think that comes through. Especially in Batman, but this kind of like, listen, I'm still gonna give you this weird shit. I'm still gonna give you something that still works and that knocks. And so, I think it gave him a particular kind of freedom because Tim Burton was kind of really sort of challenging him in a particular kind of way, if that makes sense.
Who else in the prior 10 years had said no to him?
Right.
Of like, no, I don't want that. I want
Right.
something else.
Right.
And especially because, you think about like the intro to Party Man, and part of it, I think, like Feel You Up being the B-side is from '82, right? So I always think of a 1999 album.
Yeah.
And Party Man being such an obvious pastiche of 1999 himself,
Right.
because it was meant to fit its place. And now all the movies get cut to songs,
Yeah.
right? And then they just sort of write through a cover version of the same song. But Prince would do that to himself. Like, he'd never explicitly retread his own work to the point of like the same tempo and the
Right.
same fit, and the same way that Trust does for Baby I'm a Star, where it's just like sort of plug in for this other song. For him to be accommodating that was almost a humility, like as close as he came to being humble, right? And it was such an interesting, like that was so striking to me, because I'm like, in retrospect, it's obvious at the time, it's like, these are new Prince songs.
Yeah.
Now you heard it, and also so many times that he did that medley of like Party Man into 1999, where you're just like, oh, you actually somebody's like, give me another 1999. He's like, here you go.
Right.
That's an interesting interplay, because it ends up being an interesting song on its own. But nobody else, like I said, the prior 10 years had ever said, give me one of those. And he's like, here you go.
Yeah.
All right, so we're on our final question for the sake of time, because we're going to keep it on the schedule. What is your favorite soundtrack that Prince did for a film, including Spike Lee's Girl 6?
The favorite song?
Favorite soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
That he did for a film.
I mean, I think for me, it's Girl 6 because it was the first time I was able to get Nasty Girl on CD.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was all I wanted.
Right. Yeah.
It was Graffiti Bridge for me, and the reason why was I'd grown up listening to Prince and was always a fan. That was the one where it just, in the right time, the right moment, it sort of hit me, and I was keenly aware he was not cool anymore in the way he had been with other people, and it made me like him more because he had so clearly made this choice. Because I was like, you got your own studio, you got your own whatever, and it should have been a gimme to do a sequel to Purple Rain. It's only 5 years later. And all you got to do is like do that thing again, you know what I mean? And people will be like, "Yep, that's Prince. We like that." And he so clearly didn't.
Right.
And then there's stuff on that album I don't love, but the best parts of Graffiti Bridge are as good as anything he ever did. My favorite song Prince ever did is "Still Would Stand All the Time." And I think what Arthur said about Question to You, I mean, we could do another hour on, right? And so I think and that's 2 songs. Right, and I look at like how much I learned on listening to the re-release of Purple Rain with that version of "We Can Fuck" and think about "We Can Funk" and like there's 85 different versions of that song, and I'll listen to all of them. Right, and it's just like, okay, 3 songs there, and you're like, that is a whole career's worth of hits, right. Stuff to examine. So I think I come back to Graffiti Bridge a lot, and it's like I'm not gonna cape for the title song. Like I don't think anybody's like got that in heavy rotation unless you got like a 2-year-old or something. But I think it's hard. When my son was 2, I was like, what Prince songs am I going to play for you? It's like, I got Starfish and Coffee, and then it's a lot I can't play. But anyway.
Lemon Crush.
Yeah. I think there's parts of Lemon Crush that are probably not going to.
It's about a soda.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, no, I really, part of it is I think, it was one of those galvanizing moments of sort of, are you with me?
Yeah.
Where he was challenging us as fans on purpose, as he did with Love Sexy. And I do totally agree that Love Sexy and to some degree Batman and certainly Graffiti Bridge, all of a piece or all of movements of a unified act. I loved that whole era for being this sort of like completely unafraid to be like, this is where I'm going, and I know you're not all going to come with me. And I think at that moment for me in my life personally too, it was like I have so much respect for that.
Yeah. So I think this might end up our kumbaya moment.
Uh-oh.
My answer is Parade.
Yeah.
Music from Under the Cherry Moon. Last year I wrote an essay for longreads.com. The title is Alexa de Paris. And for those who don't know, which like nobody knows this in this room, but I spent 7 years in Paris, right? From maybe 2004 to 2011. I met my wife there. My kids were born there. And this movie and the soundtrack, particularly, it's just the European feel of it, the Claire Fisher strings and stuff. Do You Lie, where the little girl speaking in French, like, it just opened up this world for me in tandem with Sting's Dream of the Blue Turtles, because there was a concert film, I guess it was called Bring on the Night maybe, where he's assembling this band of black jazz musicians, Omar Hakim and Branford Marsalis and stuff like that, and they're recording this record in a chateau in France somewhere. And between that and Under the Cherry Moon and the Parade soundtrack, I was just like, wow, like this seems like a fascinating place, like I'd like to check that out one day, and like, I don't know, fast forward, however many years, I ended up sort of relocating there, and it changed my life to go there. Like I said, meeting my wife and all of that, and my kids and stuff, and really, like that soundtrack uncorked the bottle, for my Francophilia.
I mean,
Can't believe.
I'm shocked too. So here's the thing, that's also my favorite. So it's right. This has never happened.
Never?
I don't think it's ever gonna happen again. Yeah, I mean, a similar feeling that I had when I first listened to the Batman soundtrack as a kid is the same feeling that I had when I first listened to Parade, which is Prince has kind of taken me into this other world, this kind of Prince world. I mean, right? It's the sound on it, and like every single song for me is just like how weird or how different how much can you kind of push everyone sonically, right, to this other place, to this kind of different kind of playing, right? Thinking about sort of I Wonder You, a new position, right? All these, I'm just like, my God, like, I never kind of felt that particular kind of way listening to sort of Parade. And I'll also kind of add this, that next week starts my sort of unit in my class where we do Prince and film. Right, so we're doing sort of the Sign of Time concert film, and then we're doing Purple Rain. So like, and then we do Under the Cherry Moon. We do all of these things, right? And so I'm always shocked when I do Under the Cherry Moon how much my students love that film, right? Because I always think, because it's, you know, it's campy and all these great things. It's fun. Right? No, it's campy in a good way. I just said that I like the 1960s Batman, right? I love camp, but it's like, it's campy, it's goofy, it's funny. It's authentic, right? That was your word, right? And so I'm always shocked that this is something that they'll like. It surprises me every time, and it surprises me in a good way. Because they watch, you know, sort of the Sign of Times concert film, and they're just like, wow, he really can put on a show. Prince knows how to put on a show, and I was like, he does. But for them, Under the Cherry Moon, they laugh so much, right? And a lot of their sort of feedback is like, keep that film. They hate Batman. They age well. Right? They don't like the movie. I still like the movie. So like, I always get like, get rid of Batman on the syllabus, and I'm like, no, we're keeping Batman on the syllabus. They also hate Arms of Orion. Like, that is a bar none. Anyway. I got emails about how much they hated that. It was a thing. But so for me, it's Parade is my favorite.
Do you have any direct quotes from your students about Arms of Orion?
I do.
And their hatred?
I do. Yes. Okay. So one student said that it sounded like a song from a Progressive insurance commercial. Right? Right? I was like, oh my God. Another student said
Tranquility.
that. Right. See, right. Another student said that it sounded like a watered down version of Total Eclipse of the Heart, right? You know, the whole kind of Bonnie Tyler song. And I was like, how do you know Bonnie Tyler? I was like, you're like 19, right? Wow. Another person said, like, I don't believe that Prince wrote this, right? So it was very adamant. They were like, no, Prince would never do. She was like, man, she was like, Prince would never write a song like this. Not the Prince that you've been teaching us. Prince is this. And I was like,
but young folks also don't have that context. Like,
right.
This is the era when Wilson Phillips was on the radio.
Right.
Like if you have the context, you're like, one, Prince was like, I can do anything.
Right.
I can do anything. Like, whatever you can do, I can do.
Yeah.
Right. And
I can do better. Right.
That's right. And do better. And I think that sense of like, he wasn't like, I'm not going to do things that aren't cheesy or corny.
Right.
He's like, I'll do that too. I mean, we all know there's a whole bunch of country songs in the vault that we don't want to hear right now. You know, but whenever he got a wild hair, and he's like, I can do that too. That's in there.
I mean, like, if y'all want to buy Vanilla Ice, here's Carmen Electra.
That's right.
In
That's
hot
right.
pants.
Straight up. Yeah, he's like, what's missing from Vanilla Ice is that he's not hot.
Right.
Yeah.
So here you go.
Right. Hopefully we'll never do any sort of retrospective on sort of Carmen Electra. I hope that never happens.
We will not have a Carmen Electra or T.C. Ellis, even though he's a nice man and does wonderful things for the community. But yes. So, did you want to say something?
I just want to do a read. I want to say I misunderstood the question. I thought it was a non-Prince movie soundtrack for a non-Prince movie. Oh, okay. That's where I said Girl 6, but I would also say Parade.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right. See, there you go.
All right. Well, can we give these guys a hand?
Thank you.
Awesome. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, I really, 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 really appreciate your presence.
We love you, D'Angelo.
Oh,
Love you.
thank you.
Yes, we appreciate that you have created this space
Right.
every year for us to hold aloft, you know, the importance of studying Prince
Yes.
and taking him seriously.
Well, I think Anil is going to come for Graffiti Bridge.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Okay.
If
oh,
I'm
that'd be
invited, I'll be
awesome.
there 100%.
All right, because, you know, I don't know if my husband is here, but he was like, nobody wants to come to a graffiti bridge symposium. And I was like, I do.
Right.
You're there? Right
Okay,
there.
so there we
Okay.
go.
There we-
Sold.
There.
Sold.
Sold.
Okay. Awesome. So we're actually really going to take a bio break. So the next thing we're going to do and the last thing we're going to do is actually have a Skype conversation with Chad Smith, who is Prince's cousin. But we're going to do it like Manchester did, because he can't be with us physically. So we're going to Skype with him, and each person, you can go up to the computer and ask him a question. And it was phenomenal when we did that in Manchester. Charles is so giving and generous with his with his memories of Prince when they were young, and it's always just a really great way to close the symposium. He's very uplifting, has mad energy. I'm super tired, so he's going to give me his energy, but we're going to end promptly at 7 o'clock because I'm trying to stick to things. So we're going to get started at 6:15, barring any tech difficulties. So stretch your legs, get some air, and come back at 6:15.
Right.